there developed in Lithuania in the 18th century two movements which on the one hand accepted the allegorical interpretation of the doctrine of Tzimtzum, but on the other hand tried also to salvage the notion of distinctions. And what I'm talking about is Rav Shneur Zalman Miladi and Chabad, and Reb Chaim of Volozhin as he expounded the theory of the Gra, which is not exactly the same. There are certain differences. Just as Chabad today is different than Rav Shneur Zalman Miladi, who was a very profound and sophisticated thinker who produced one of the most complicated theological schemes, and Chabad today is much more of a practical movement. Okay, now both of these movements understood that there are really three levels of reality that are created by three different levels of consciousness. The highest realm, you can't even speak of consciousness, you cannot say anything about it, I call it just It is beyond words and before verbal explication. But that reality is reflected or grasped by two other levels of two other conceptions. One which was understood as or labeled as Mitzidon by Reb Chaim of Volozhin, and the other described as Mitzidenu. Mitzidon refers to how we, in our illusory sense of separateness and separate existence, ontologically, how we, if we can jump out of our illusory skins, imagine that God sees the world, sees us from his point of view. And Mitzidenu is from our point of view, how do we experience the relationship of God to us from our point of view? Now both Chassidut and Mitnagdut, just as they were united regarding the highest level of they also, when they tried to articulate that in words, spoke about God from his point of view as being a pantheistic, acosmic existence. In other words, from his point of view, they tried to articulate by saying, there is nothing other than he, in od milvado. From our point of view, that's where the big difference between Chassidut and Mitnagdut lies, and you might say it illustrates the truism that sometimes movements that are close together feel their differences much more painfully and acutely than... So if we put it into theological jargon, we could say that for the Mitnagdim, Mitzidenu is panentheism. Right. In other words, we are part of God, but less so. Whereas for the Hasidim, our reality is a theistic reality, where we are other than God. And for this reason, what we strive for in our Avodat Hashem is different. According to the Hasidim of the Mitnagdim, we can suffice with the reality in this world as it is, and Reb Chaim of Volozhin says he doesn't recommend the ordinary run-of-the-mill Jew to try and go past this reality. Just occasionally, you should know that there is other reality. He uses the imagery of embers to a fire. You warm yourself with the embers a bit, but if you go close to the fire, you can get burnt. Whereas, and especially learning Torah and doing the halacha without any special kavanah, just doing it, you are cleaving to God as he is in himself. Whereas according to the Hasidim, of course not every Hasid can do it, and by the way, I'm talking generalities. This is just Hasidut Chabad, and there are other variations, but as a generality, and there are even conflicting themes in the writings of Rav Shneur Zalman Miladi himself. But in general, the ideal which not every Chassid can do, sometimes it's just by cleaving to a Rebbe, is to try and overcome the consciousness of separateness by uniting spirit and matter in the performance of mitzvot, or uniting the intellectual aspect of learning Torah with the practical aspect of engaging in avodah b'gashmiut. Then we can somehow lehorid et ha'ilyonim letachtonim. We can draw down that unity and replicate it in this world, and merge with the undifferentiated divine essence, even though they also put brakes to that ideal, and they never reach, or they never cross over into the boundary of pure pantheism, which was always rejected by Judaism, so that even when we merge with that light that is Mitzido, it's the light and not the source of the light. It's the Ol and not the Ma'ol. Okay? Now, that view, in both cases, is already a layered conception of God, which somehow combines the outside and or it strives to combine, merge the outside and the inside point of view. And that was developed even further. There's a saying that I like to, it was said in the name of Rav Nachman, which tries to conflate these two views further. He says, whenever I think about God, I am saddened, because I realize that when thinking about Him, I am distancing myself from Him, because His is a reality that doesn't even allow for thought. Thought is already subject-object. But then I realize that if God is all, then He also includes my thought and my distance, and then I am consoled. And a further development of this twisting of in and out, even more elaborately, I find in the writings of Rav Kook, where Rav Kook really, even consciously, tried to amalgamate the Hasidic and the Misnagdish views. In his office as chief rabbi, he had a picture of the Gra, and he had a picture of the Rav Shner Zalman Miladi, and these were both consciously a source of inspiration, and he expresses himself as wishing to take the best of both. So his whole philosophy is really a merging of the importance of this worldly activity that the Mitnagdim have, but nevertheless adopting the grandness or the ambition of the Hasidim to try and overcome the limitations of this worldliness by developing a conception of God as follows. We, from our point of view, imagine God as shlemut, perfection. That perfection, when you talk about it from the point of view of or even Mitzido, you can't talk about it as movement or having distinctions. Nevertheless, from our point of view, when we think about shlemut, for us shlemut involves lack. Because from our point of view, if you can't grow, if you can't increase infinity, then there's something bad about that. It's static. And therefore, from our point of view, the ideal is to attach our freedom of activity, freedom of decision, ability to grow, onto that infinite unity which from our point of view appears static. So that static and dynamic become one. And that is the ideal of shlemut mishtalemet. So in this kind of jumble and mix of intertwining of our point of view and God's point of view, he is somehow, he doesn't talk this language at all, but he is somehow constructing a construct that is beyond construct. And that is the kind, I don't know how to translate in brass tacks, but that's somehow how our view of religion should be. A view which somehow jumbles so that they are in the inside and outside of view so that they are indistinguishable.